Welcome to the Can't Commit to a Book Club, the interview edition with executive producer Johna. I got the awesome opportunity to talk to New York Times bestselling and USA Today bestselling author Jay Crownover about all of her new projects. I can't wait for you guys to hear this. Jay, welcome to the Can't Commit to a Book Club with me. I'm executive producer Johna. Yes. Because committing to a book club is a lot of work for people, especially in the world that we live in, where everybody's just so busy.
I was reading this article. There's somewhere that's doing bring a book to a bar night instead of book clubs for like people that like if you're not part of a club, but you still want to go read and be social, that they're doing like nights where you can go and just sit in a bar with a book and read. I was like my old bartender self, because you know that's what I used to do before I wrote. Mm-hmm. Before writing, I was like, man, I would have done that. That's brilliant.
Right? That is so smart. I might have to open up a business like that or something.
No, seriously. Like booze and books. Girls. You make so much money.
Here in Indiana, we have a place called Books and Brews.
Oh.
And so it's just like beer, and they have like bookshelves everywhere with books just even on the top. It's really awesome, but it's called Books and Brews.
I think I've ever been to Indiana. I think that's one of the few states I haven't been to for an event or promo.
Well, you got fans here, I promise.
It's not on purpose. Usually it's just, I always try and do stuff, kind of like back to back to back. So if I'm tired at one fell swoop, not tired all year long. So it probably was just something that never fit in my schedule.
I totally get that. 100% get that. I know once I'm tired, I'm like tired. I'm like, nope, we need at least a week to recover. I'm sorry.
And post-pandemic, book signings now are just, it's like going to Comic-Con. It's not just a book signing anymore. It takes a lot. Like it takes a lot to be that cheerful for like 3 or 4 days straight.
Oh, I bet your face probably hurts from smiling so much all the time.
Yeah, I guess I haven't done one of the smaller ones. I've only done a couple of the big ones post-pandemic, but because everybody was locked away for so long. And I think because Book Talk has changed the landscape and there's a whole new bunch of readers that have never done a book signing before and like new authors, like as I said, it's like going to Comic-Con because I've signed at normal book signings and I've signed at Comic-Con and now they're all much more like Comic-Con.
Oh man, I've never actually been to for any author, I've never actually been to a book signing before.
Oh, you should go. They're really fun. Book people are just fun,
Yeah. I just don't know if any author that I've liked has come to Indiana to do a book signing. And if they have, I find out about it like 3 days after the fact.
Yeah. I guess that does make it harder to if it's got to be worth it to go out and mingle with people.
Right. If I'm the only one showing up, I'm going to be there. I promise.
Right.
First thing I want to talk about, because I was creeping on your website earlier so I could, because I'm a great interviewer, I saw something that told me that Rule from the Marked Men series is getting a movie.
Yeah. Exciting, right? Next year. It'll be out sometime next year. I don't know when. I don't know the finalized date. But
literally so excited. What can you tell me about it?
I can tell you that it's done filming. They filmed it last winter, and it's been in editing and post-production this whole year. I can tell you that the cast is pretty great, and that most of the main characters from the 6 books make an appearance in the first movie. Not all, obviously, because it would be too many. I can tell you that Chase Stokes is going to be Rule. So I don't know if you're fans of The Outer Banks or watch Netflix, but he's the star of that. And everyone's, he's such a surfer. He's too clean cut. But I've seen the behind on him in costume. And I think he will surprise people when they see the final. Nick Cassavetes directed it. And Nick Cassavetes is the guy that directed Nicholas Sparks' The Notebook. One of the greatest romances of all time. And he hasn't really done a romance since The Notebook. So I'm pretty honored and pretty touched he liked my book enough and the screenplay from the book enough that he agreed to work on this one. I'm trying to think, what else am I allowed to say?
Right. I don't want you to get in trouble. I don't want you to give away too much, but
the original plan was hopefully if this one does well to see more of the Marked Men in movies, but everything has kind of changed because, Hollywood's on strike, actors and writers, which we support. We fully support writers not wanting AI to do their job because I don't want AI to do my job.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of shifted things, and the focus from it being on all the characters is kind of narrowed down to just see how this movie does. So if anybody out there wants to see more Marked Men movies, you got to go see Rule to make it a success.
I do. I didn't even know that Rule was getting a movie until today. And I'm like, I need all of them, because I looked at like the cast photos for all the people, and I was like, some of these guys, they're exactly what I would imagine as Nash or Rome, or I was just like, this is gonna be so perfect.
Well, they did a really good job of, one of the things we talked about before we sold it is, you know, when I wrote the Marked Men, I wasn't a writer. I didn't know publishing. I didn't know audience. I didn't write it in the terms of being a professional writer. I just wrote it because I was broke and I wasn't leaving my house, and like was tired of going to the library. So I was like, I'm just going to write my own book. At the start, when I started it, like I was a professional. I didn't know what the industry was like. I didn't know the scope that my books could reach. So I wasn't like thinking about like diversity and inclusivity, which I do in my real life. But like when you're doing something like that, you don't think beyond what you're doing for the first time, right? So when we sold it, they were very aware, and I was very adamant that we had to diversify the cast a little bit. Like they couldn't just be all 6 white people to build an entire world. That's not accurate to life. That's not accurate to what Denver looks like. So that's one of my favorite parts that like doesn't really have anything to do with the changes made to my book or my writing or the characters, but adding some flavor in there so it's not so boring, I think is one of the best changes that came from Nick in the studio.
And it's good. I mean, it's because different people have different chemistry together, you know? So like I you know, I literally can't wait. Like I saw that today, and I'm like sitting in my office. I'm like, and like I don't have any. And I was like, oh my god! I was like 3:00. My time can't come soon enough because I have to talk about this.
The cast really got along really well because they filmed in Eastern Europe. They didn't film in the States. So they were there for 8 weeks in winter. So just like the 6 or 7 of the main cast. So they all really bonded and got really close together, which I think is super awesome, because that's one of the key factors of the Marked Men is they're all super good friends and family, and the whole found family, and you know, we'll support you if your real family won't type thing. So I haven't seen the final cut yet because like I said, it's still in editing, but that's one of my personal hopes is that unity and all the different diverse friends and all the different dynamics between, you know, Rule and Nash and like Rome and Asa when he's not introduced in this one, but you know, like I hope that they keep all of that.
Yes. Oh gosh. Oh, I just literally can't wait. I literally was talking to my friend who lives in Portland. She's rereading the Marked Men series, and I was like, "That's so funny that you're doing that. I'm literally gonna be interviewing Jay." We were just going back and forth, and she was like, "Gosh," she was like, "I just love Nash," and I'm like, "I love Rome. Rome is like one of my faves, you know."
The guy that's going to be Rome in the movie is from the Vikings. He's one of the Vikings, so we really like him.
Oh my gosh, I knew he looked familiar.
Yeah, Alexander. What's his last name? Something like Scandinavian.
Yeah,
can't think of it off the top of my head, but yeah, he's in the Vikings. So I was like, when they told me, and you know, Rome's older and more mature, I was like, oh, I was like, we'll take a Viking. We can have a Viking.
I'm not gonna say no to one, you know.
Right?
I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm literally so excited. I will be one of the first people in the theater seeing that movie.
Well, I said, I don't know. I said the writer's strike has changed like the trajectory of just, it's pushed everything back really, really far, you know, and like the future, not of Rule is definitely coming out and we'll definitely see it, but the future of the whole, like the entity as a whole is not as certain as it was before the writer's strike started, but you know, like I said, we support it because we don't want AI stealing our jobs.
No, look, as a person who is also a writer, I don't want that.
For real.
Since we're on the Marked Men series, which one of those books or characters is your favorite one?
I mean, I have the biggest soft spot for Rule because like I was saying earlier, I didn't write it as a professional or somebody that knew anything about writing a book or anything about how self-publishing or traditional publishing. I literally wrote it because I was going through the hardest time ever and I needed a distraction. And when I said was broke, I don't mean like I had $0. I mean, I had like negative $100,000. Like I wasn't broke. I was like under broke. Like my very first paycheck I got for Rule was like over 6 figures, but I needed all of that money, all of those 6 figures to get to 0. Like,
oh my
to
gosh.
be at 0. Yeah. My divorce was freaking terrible. It just was like financially terrible. Emotionally, I was very glad to be done and left alone. But like financially, it was very, very, very difficult. So if I hadn't written that book, I have no idea where I would have ended up. I probably would have had to file bankruptcy. I probably would have lost my house. You know, I did have to sell a car. Like I was in pretty dire straits when it comes to like day-to-day making ends meet before Rule published. But like my favorite of the series, like my personal like attachment to a character is Asa. And I mean, I always kind of prefer like actually bad boys like that do bad things, not just bad boys that are like, you know, kind of tough like Rule. I like the dudes that are like really morally gray and kind of have this skewed sense of ethics. I think those are the most fun characters to write because you never know just how dark that gray can get. You know, and with Ace's character, when he shows up in Jet and then through the whole series, that's my favorite is you see all those different shades of gray of him, like from, you know, to the end when he's finally in the white, like when he's come around. And so I think for me, his character is the most interesting just because of his character arc wasn't the beginning of the book and the end of the book in his book. It was from the minute he showed up into the series till the end of the series. So I think I just spent the most time with him and I just found him the most interesting, you know? And he's got a Southern accent, which is hot.
I mean, I know whenever I would read Aiden, I would literally read her in a Southern accent, like the most Southern of Southern accents that you could get. And I was like, man, and then her brother comes in and I was like, oh, I was like, I'm in love with this man. I don't know what to do.
Well, they changed Aiden in the movie is played by Elisa, Elisa, Elsa Blanksy, and she's African-American. So if we get to add Asa in, he's going to be an African-American character because they're brother and sister, so he has to be. So I said that'll be an interesting. I think that's just one of the more interesting aspects of the change from book to movie.
Look, I'm just so rooting for. I don't care if they're like big Hollywood. I mean, I know you probably care, but if they're like Netflix or Hulu movies or Prime, I will personally donate to the Marked Men series if necessary. I don't have any money.
I mean, I'm not like particular about, where it airs. I mean, I think sometimes when it's in big movie theaters, that's great. But did you read Red, White, and Royal Blue, Casey McQuiston's book? That just
I did not read it, but I know that it's on Prime.
And it blew everything out of the water. It's like the third most watched thing on Amazon Prime in Amazon Prime like history. Yeah. So like in a situation like that for me, because Rule's over 10 years old, that would be amazing because the more people that access it, that means the more people can go get the book and not just the book, the whole series. You know what I mean? Whereas in a movie theater, you know, that's limited to people that are willing to spend what, $14, $13 to go to the movies versus just sit on your couch for free and stream something. So like, I don't have a firm opinion on where it becomes available. I just want as many people and especially as many new people that have no idea what the Marked Men is to access it. Cause I would love for people like, if it is just Rule to read through the whole series.
Oh yeah. I tell people all the time, like when I first got like back into reading, I was going to college and I was at a Target and I was like, I'm going to buy a book. And I just saw the cover of Rule and I was like, you know what? I'll read this. And I just ate it in like a day. And then it was like, oh, there's a second book. And I'm like, oh, a third book. Oh. And then I just have the whole series on my shelf just hanging out. Everybody.
That cute boy on the cover of Rule did more to sell that book than anything I did when I first started.
Look, man, those were some hot men on those covers. So it definitely sold me.
The only one I'm not a big fan of is Jet's cover. I know, like they were because by then I'd sold it to a publisher and like the publisher just was like, well, we can't really put like a heavy metal guy on the cover because it's going in Target and it's going in Walmart and they won't want a guy with, you know, long heavy metal hair and pierced face. I was like, yeah, but other people will want it. Like,
excuse me, I still would have bought it. What do you mean?
That's just of all 6 books, that's the only cover that I'm kind of like, it's not my favorite.
Yeah, I get that. I really liked Nash's cover. That was a really good cover.
He was actually, it's That's crazy. He's usually everyone's favorite, but that picture was actually, I picked that out. I don't know how familiar with all my series you are, but he was supposed to be on the cover of Better When He's Bad. He was supposed to be Dax. But when the publisher did like a custom photo shoot for Nash, but what they turned out, the guy was like, he was bad, but like the vibe wasn't there. Like Nash had such a specific, like hard and soft vibe. He's such a dichotomy of, all the things that he is, and like that the guy just couldn't emulate that. Like he looked like he was gonna rip heads off like babies or something. Like I was like, because Nash is big and buff and tattoos, so is the guy, but he couldn't get his face to cooperate with what we needed. So we had already had that picture for Dax, and I was like, just use that one because that's the perfect mix of hard and soft. I was like, and then we'll find something else for Better When He's Bad. But
I love the behind the scenes.
There's a lot. Like, it's not just sitting down and writing a book. There's like a whole business you have to run, which it makes me tired. Like, I was not a social media person. Like, I'm still not a social media person. So the fact that you like have to have this whole social media business along with writing, it's exhausting for me. That is my least favorite part of just books.
I get that.
And romance. Even though, TikTok can sell more books than a publisher these days, and like Book Talk is driving the book market. Like I will say I'll have somebody else make me TikToks and I'll log into my account and post them and then leave. Like I don't enjoy it. Like I'm not a doom scroller. Like I don't like, you know what I mean? Like I don't just, it's just not my vibe. Like none of it's my vibe.
I get that. Social media is so hard, and Book Talk is just, it's a tough thing to kind of get into.
I mean, I think it's great for people that were unknown and broke out for it. Like how lucky to make one viral TikTok and all of a sudden you've sold 50,000 books. That's amazing. But the flip side of that is the weird, like TikTok suddenly thinking like Colleen Hoover has always been very successful and very looked up to and she's always been a bestseller in, let's say, romance. Like she's always been the best at that. But TikTok being like, well, we made her famous. No, you didn't. And what TikTok did is instead of making her the best in romance, they just made her the best in all books. You know what I mean? That's the difference is, she was already the best. Now she's just the bestest. So and you can't deny its influence. Like you can't deny the huge influence Book Talk and book talkers have on the current Book Talk market. But like for those of you like me that just aren't invested in it or like really, I don't know, just adverse to it, it makes what I've always done more difficult. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's tough because you have to have so many different social medias. Like you have to have a website on top of having a TikTok, on top of having an Instagram, on top of Facebook, on top of Twitter or X or whatever it's called now. Yeah. There's so many different ways for people to come at you, and you are always having to put out content. Like it is exhausting.
And I mean, I'm very Gen X, like very Gen X. So I don't want to create content. I don't mind putting like a picture of my dogs because they're cute on Instagram, but like putting a picture of my face and like coming up with like cute, like whatever over, it's just not for me. I do not want to be. And, like I said, I'm very Gen X coded, I'm not into influencers. I don't want to influence or be influenced by anyone. Like I am very, very the influencer culture just rubs me the wrong way. I'm enough of a still, like I was a big punk rock kid right up until I like hit 20, 25. Like I was super into everything that was anti everything else. So it's really, really hard for me now as a grown adult to be into everything that is super, super popular. That is ingrained in me from my punk rock days. If everybody likes it, there's something wrong with it.
You're probably not wrong. You did just have a new book come out this past week, Son of a Gun. That is the third book in a series, correct?
Right. It's the spinoff of the Marked Men Kids.
The Marked Men Kids.
Yes.
I didn't realize that you had written so many Marked Men spinoffs, and I was going through your website, and I was like, Jake, my bookshelves are already so heavy.
Yeah, so there's the original spinoff, which had a bunch of the side characters from the Marked Men that I just couldn't fit into the Marked Men series. It's called The Saints of Denver. So that I wrote really quickly after the Marked Men. So that series is about, like, when I stopped writing the Marked Men, I started that series. This one, the new one, that it's got, the first book is Rule's son and Jet Naden's daughter. The second one is Rome's daughter, and then the first couple from the Saints of Denver, their son. This new one I just finished is Rule's daughter. And I was never going to write the kids. Like, I was never going to. Like, I always thought that was just because I don't want to write in the future. Like, I don't want to think about what 40 years in the future from now looks like. It seems hard. I'm not a sci-fi person. So I was like, I'm not going to write the kids. Like, I'm just not going to do it. But, like, enough time had passed. Like I said, it was like, it's been 10 years this year since Rule published, that I finally was like, felt like I was in a place that I could tell the stories and I wasn't just retelling Marked Men stories, if that makes sense. Like, that there was enough of a generational like shift, which I feel is true now, like the shift between millennial and Gen Z, that I was like, I could make the characters stand on their own and not just be carbon copies of their parents, if that makes sense. So
who was the hardest character to write?
Oh man, I don't know. I've written like so many books.
I know. I was going through and I was like, oh my goodness, she's written so many books.
I mean, any of my characters that are like really empathetic and like sympathetic to other people and like really emotionally in tune to others are hard for me, because I mean, I hate to say it and sell myself out, but I am not that person. Like, I am not somebody that's like overly invested in like the emotions of others in the real world. I mean, of course, the exception to that rule is people that I care about and really love. But, you know, like, don't pick a fight with me on the internet, because I could literally care less about strangers. Like, I'm like, whatever. Like, if you want to come on the internet and tell me everything that's wrong with me and how all my ideas are wrong and like anything, if you are somebody I don't know in the real world or have some kind of connection with, like, to me, you are just a person on the internet. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't have that same, I guess I mean empathy, but I'm trying to think of another way to put it.
You're just like, you care, but you don't care enough to fight about it.
Right. I'm pretty much generally indifferent to things that don't directly affect me or those around me. Probably because I am that way, I tend to surround myself with friends that have big feelings and feel a lot of things. So like, I'm sure that's me compensating for my own weaknesses and lack of things, but those are the people I tend to be invested in when we're like friends or families. But anytime I write a character like Saint, I feel is one of those characters. Another thing, like, I'm not insecure and I don't have a lot of self-confidence issues because I don't care about anything. So it's hard to let somebody who, you know, doesn't think I'm pretty or doesn't think I'm thin enough or doesn't think I'm talented. Like, it's hard for me to care about them unless it's from a trusted source. So writing a woman or a young girl who does have all those insecurities is difficult for me to get into that headset. I really have to think about, you know, if I was that kind of person, what would my reactions be? Because they would not be sadness. I wrote a book last year, like, that didn't have anything to do with anything. I just wanted to write something different. So it's got like it's not a real supernatural, but like a twist that's like a little funky twist that kind of throws in thriller, but a bit of supernatural. And you don't really know what, it's kind of like, what's the movie with the top in Inception with Leonardo DiCaprio? Like, you don't really know at the end if it was reality or this other thing that's going on in the book. And that was really difficult to write because she's an unreliable narrator, because there's this other thing going on that's not the way the story's flowing. So there's two storylines at the same time going on. So that was really difficult, not because the character was difficult, but writing her in both mind frames in both times and making sure that she was still the same person in both, but reacting to both situations independently was incredibly hard.
Oh yeah. I bet. I definitely could not do two timelines. It's already hard enough for me when I read books and they're like, okay, we're in the present. Now we're 10 years ago. And I'm like, I'm like, but I was already in the mindset of today. Now I have to go back 10 years. That's a lot.
But it's honestly one of my, because it's I mean, it's a romance, and it's got contemporary vibes to it, but it's one of my favorites because it's more plot driven. The romance is there to support the plot and to support the two characters like existing in these time frames. But it's the first book I've written that I can say the outline and the story graph were all based around the plot and like the growth of the plot versus the character arc growth and the romance growth, which is usually what I focus on when I'm like, I gotta write a book. So where do I start? Where does it middle? What's the end? That's usually focused on like where the characters and their relationship is going, not where the plot is going. So.
Yeah. Okay. I get that. And I did see that you did do a collaboration with Rebecca Yarros.
Oh yeah, several years ago.
So what was that like working with? I think that's the only one that I've seen is that the one of you and Rebecca Yarros.
Yeah,
but like
she used to live, we still live in the same town. Well, she lives in a suburb of town in Colorado, but we used to live literally across the street from each other. And then the way it came about is we both had new releases with different publishers within a month of each other. We both write pretty fast too. So we talked about doing a pre-order thing because, you know, nowadays you can't just release a book. It seems like you have to entice people to pre-order. Yeah. So we wrote the first part of that duet for my release and the second part of that duet for her release, and we gave them away for free. So like the fact that people are reading it now because Rebecca's blown up so big and The Fourth Wing was such a big hit, and I'm seeing all these posts about people reading her backlist and that pops up all the time. I'm like, man, I didn't have to do anything. But yeah, we used to, now that she lives much farther away and now that she's much busier because of everything that's happened with The Fourth Wing and how big it's been, like we don't stay in touch as much as we used to. But I mean, I used to literally be able to walk to her house if I wanted to.
Oh yeah, I get that. When the friends live down the street or across the street and then they move far away and you're like, I miss you.
I mean, she was always busy because she has a lot of kids. And when we first started being friends, her husband was actually deployed for the first like a year and a half that we were friends. You know, she would call me occasionally and I'd go pick the kids up from school because I was so close, and her daughter had to go to a special school like on the other side of town. I mean, but she's always been busy, but now, I mean, she's even more busy because that book was clearly going to be the best-selling book of this year unless somebody else comes out with something that blows it out of the water, which is highly unlikely. I mean, she's a very good, hardworking human. So we've been writing about the same amount of time. I think she started a little bit before me. So it's kind of cool, you know, somebody that I know in person that's, you know, a good human to have this kind of a success. But as a writer, it's like cool to see somebody who has written for so long and put the work in so long into their career and never gave up. And especially, you know, when you have that many kids and you're a single mom because your husband's in a war zone, like for all the hard work that she did while all that was going on to have this happen. So now that, you know, her husband's home and the kids are old enough to appreciate, see their success, I think that's cool as a like coworker or whatever, colleague, you know? So I know I wish her nothing but good things.
Well, I mean, good things are coming your way too. You got a whole movie coming out, man.
Yeah.
That's
I
so
mean,
awesome.
you know, I said, I can't make all the books turn into movies. All I could do is write books. So I can't say I wouldn't wish it was easier that everything sold as well as The Marked Man, but that's just not realistic.
Well, I mean, you know, The Marked Man is it's your first, it's like your baby, you know, it's like your firstborn child. It's like the thing that you put your heart into because you're like, this is gonna make or break me. And then it was successful. So it was like,
I think the reason it's so popular is not, I mean, yes, the characters and yes, but like I said, the reason it was so popular initially is when I wrote it, one of the reasons I wrote it aside from my financial situation was I was reading new adult. So I was reading Cora Carmack and Jen Armentrout and Tamara Weber and Colleen Hoover and Jamie McGuire, like all that stuff that came out, Kathleen Tucker at once. Like I loved it because that was my favorite time in my life, my early 20s, and you know, trying to balance working in a bar and going to college and be a somewhat reasonable adult and failing at it. I'm still a terrible adult and I'm almost 45. So new adult to this day, even after a decade, is still my favorite. That's my favorite age range. Those are usually my favorite stories come out of that genre. But at the time when it started to get big, like they were writing characters that like looked like tattooed, you know, they'd have tattoos and they'd be dressed, but nobody was writing about like punk rock culture and tattoo artists and like heavy metal guys. Nobody was writing about alternative, I guess, you know, type heroes. Like there definitely wasn't a rockabilly hero until Rowdy. There were not these characters that like you know, were the guys that I dated growing up and in my 20s, or the people that I wanted to like, the guys that I found attractive, you know, when I was that age. There weren't many, like there were no skater boy romance heroes, you know?
Right.
So that was one of the reasons I sat down. I remember one of the very first reviews I read, when I still read reviews. That's a long time ago. I didn't know. I hadn't gone through Trial and Fire yet. But I remember one of the first reviews I read, a girl, like the girl reviewer was like, I didn't know if I just read a romance novel or I just spent 2 hours at the Warp Tour. I was like, she was like, the Warp Tour down to the character wears Dickies and knows who Mike Ness is. And I was like, that's the whole point. I've never read a book where a character has Dickies and knows who Mike Ness is.
Right.
But that's the kind of romance hero I want. That's what I want to read about. So because there was nothing like that in the market, that's why I think they were so beloved. And, you know, all the Gen X girls were like, these guys.
Yeah. They're like, this is the guy. Don't look at my husband. This is the guy right here.
Honestly, when we sold it to like the movie company, those were the things that we sold it on. Was like when I had the very, very first meeting with the head producer guy, and we were talking about it. And I told him, like, I understand you have to change things. I was like, but you still have to keep it very like cool. I was like, you still have to keep it that this guy, whatever you change him to make him modern and fit this time, because like I said, it's been a decade, he still needs to be a guy that knows who Mike Ness is.
Right.
Like I literally said that. I was like, he has to still be a guy you would believe listens to Social Distortion. That has to be something that you keep in his character. And weirdly enough, the reason I felt so comfortable selling it to the studio is because when I talked to him, he understood what that like sentence meant. When I was like, kept telling him, like talking about Social Distortion, like he understood, one, that there wasn't really a hero in young romance adaptations that fit that mold, but also what that meant that they had to do in the screenplay. So fingers crossed, when I finally see the final edit, they kept him as a guy who knows who Michael is.
Well, I would hope so, especially since you were so adamant about it.
Yeah, but we'll see. That's all their money. Like when you sell your rights to someone, unless you invest your own money to keep like a producing credit, like your power is very limited once you sign your rights away, you know, unless you're E.L. James and you have all the money and you just like keep like the project under your own umbrella. I don't have that kind of money.
Must be nice. Oh man, I know it's going to be awesome. I mean,
I have high hopes. Like I have really high hopes. I mean, anybody that looks at like the market, the same company did Anna Todd's After series, and you know the response to those was amazing. But I said Red, White, and Royal Blue, the Hello Kitty, XOXO Kitty, you know, like all the young adult adaptations. There's clearly a market for it as long as they do it well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So let's just hope that they do it well. Yeah.
I would hope so. I mean, you know, I, as you know, a person who read Twilight, and I read To All the Boys I Loved Before and stuff like that, you know, it is a little hard to be the person who's, I read the book, but this isn't the book, you know?
Yeah.
Like, this isn't what I want it to be. Like, it's really hard to be a reader when the book that you love gets adapted into a movie and you're like, oh man, this is going to be great. It's going to be awesome. And then you go in and you see it and you're like, you know, but I mean, Twilight, I loved Twilight. I don't care what anybody says. Okay. I loved Twilight.
But like, I've learned now going through this process, like my books are generally, you know, 300 to 500 pages. They're usually 100,000 words, 110,000 words. A script cannot be more than 110 pages. So if you've got a 500-page book or a 300-page book, like you're already losing half of that content. Yeah. And they can only be so many amount of words before they can be submitted to the studio for approval. So like people that are like, oh, they left all this out of the script and this didn't make it into the cut. And there's reasons for that I didn't know now. Like you have to leave some stuff out, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I can understand. You can't make a 10-hour movie as much as I would, you know, I would love it, but it's not my money.
But even not just US young romance, like new adult romance. I mean, there's that Italian one that's like My Fault. That's got the girl, the cars that they drive.
I saw that movie.
Yeah, you know, that was like trending, even with it not being English. It was trending like #1 in Amazon forever. And then there's the one on Netflix that is real sexy. That's a Spanish new adult. Through My Window. Did you see that one?
I did not see Through My. Oh,
watch that one. If you like the one with the cars, with the.
Let me write it down. I think I might have seen. I don't really get on Netflix that much anymore because I'm like,
it's a way sexier than the one on Amazon.
Okay,
but it's very good. But they're both. I mean, they're both new adult novels. They're just in different languages, you know. But they were both #1 in their respective viewing sites. So, clearly there's a market for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just because I speak English as my first language, and not that I really speak a second language. I kind of speak Spanish, but not really. I love a good, telenovela, or I love that movie 365 Days. I can watch a movie in a different language with English subtitles all day long because there's more drama. There's more like things going on that I love. So
365 Days is even different because she's Polish.
Yeah.
They made it in Spain, right? Or Italian?
Yeah. Because I think he's Italian and she's Polish. Yeah. And the only language that they both speak is English.
Yeah.
So, but I was like, this is, I don't know. It's book and movie adaptations. Like I could talk about them all day long because 90% of the time I'm just like, if I saw the movie, I didn't read the book, or if I read the book and I saw the movie,
Well, I just keep telling anybody that's like really worried about it. I'm like, I think you just have to look at them as they're like sisters. They're not twin sisters. They're not copy paste exact same sisters. They're not. I was like, but they're definitely siblings from the same family. Like maybe they don't even have the same mom and dad, but they are still in the same family. Like they are definitely sisters.
There's still blood there, Yeah,
that's what I mean. That they're definitely still related, even if they aren't twins. Like
I didn't know that you had written so many books. So when I was looking, I was like, and they're all like series books. Like you have a couple of standalones.
Yeah, it's because I think big picture. I think the one I just wrote, Son of a Gun, actually connects The Marked Men and The Point, but through the connection of those two series, a bunch of those standalones you're talking about, I tied them all together. So it's one big Jay Crownover universe, which is really unrealistic in the real world. But if people buy it from Marvel, I don't understand. They can buy it from me. I can be connected to. I can have an Iron Man and a Captain America and put them in the same thing.
I love it. Look, I would live with all the hot men in that universe. I would absolutely live there.
I really invested in interesting side characters because you have to build a whole world, And now now that I've been writing for so long and I'm more culturally and socially aware, I know I can't just build this boring one homogenized world. I have to elaborate it and make it bigger and better and more cohesive. So that's also something why I write series, because you can't. You do want to be able to expand and diversify and make it more interesting. So very rarely write just one. But like I said, that time travel book is probably the best book I've ever written. And it is a one-off. I mean, it takes place in another series setting, like the world called The Point, but it doesn't have anything to do with that series. That's just the setting of it. Because it's a made up place. And the book is like a weird supernatural thriller time travel. So I couldn't set it in the United States, or I had to put it in a make-believe place. And since I already have a make-believe place, I wanted to just use that.
What other authors are your favorite authors that you would recommend that readers read?
Well, I mean, my best friend in the whole world is Cora Carmack, and she writes new adult and fantasy. She's been on a bit of a hiatus for the last couple of years. She got really sick in like 2018. So she kind of struggled with a diagnosis for that. But I always love her writing because it's effortless and it's funny, but it's also really detailed and sharp. I mean, Jen Armentrout has been one of my favorites forever. We're also like pretty good friends. I think she's never really written anything that I was like, that was terrible. I mean, and she's written like 50 some books. I mean, I just don't read fantasy. So that's kind of where I've run into a wall, because a lot of like my favorite people are writing fantasy now. So I'm just not a big fantasy reader. I really like male romance. And there's this author named Avril Ashton. I freaking love her books. Like they're real gritty and kind of dark. Like she really leans into like anti-heroes and male romance. I really enjoy her stuff. My favorite romance author of all time is Anne Stewart. Like she's been writing romance since pre-Nora Roberts romance. And she's just a phenomenal character builder and storyteller. She doesn't write much anymore because, she's an older lady, but her books are my hands down. Like, I'm not a big rereader. I just don't, I'm not a big movie rewatcher. I just don't redo a lot of things.
Yeah.
Her books are the exception to that rule. I will read her stuff all the time. Oh, I really like Nalini Singh. She wrote what she did, Changelings, that, and she did Archangels, which I really like. Yeah, she's a really solid writer. She writes the vampires, like urban fantasy. I really like her books. Kristen Ashley for like modern romance, and just as a person, I really like all her stuff. Penelope Douglas, I like Penelope Douglas's stuff. Yeah, I mean, I'm a pretty open-minded reader, like, but I don't read fantasy like that. I'm not just gonna like willingly pick up fantasy. Oh, and I'm not like big into the new trends, like alien romance and monster romance aren't really my jam. You know, like I get the appeal, I get why they're cool, but that's not just like something I'm huge into. Honestly, what I read 90% of the time right now, if it's not, I really like thrillers, obviously. Jennifer Ryan, who's a cowboy writer, normally signed a deal with this thriller series with Amazon, and she's such a good writer. It was great. She sent me that. I really liked. But I read webtoons. Like I read a lot of, because I watch K-dramas, and a lot of the K-dramas have been adapted from webtoons. So now like if I'm gonna read, like I just scroll through a webtoon for a couple hours. So honestly, 90% of what I've been reading like the last 2 years has been webtoons.
Oh man, I can't get in. I've been trying. I was like, I'm gonna make it a point to try and get into thrillers this year. Not even like a horror type thriller, but kind of like a suspense mystery, you know. And I just can't do it. I just can't get into it. I've been trying.
I think it's because, like I said, I've really been enjoying plot heavy novels, and thrillers are always really plot driven. Oh, and I binge through because I love the show Bosch. Like I love Harry Bosch and Titus Welliver, that's Bosch. So when that new season came out, after I finished that, I was like, I should read these books. So I went, there's 20 of them though. So I read through that whole series.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I said, I'm a pretty open-minded reader. Like fantasy's not my favorite. I'm not a huge sci-fi reader. And I don't like anything like real, like vanilla-y YA. Like I'm not a big fan of, you know, like real teeny tweeny YA like that. I've been trying to watch The Summer I Turned Pretty and be invested in that.
I read that whole series, The Summer I Turned Pretty, but I read it when I was like in college. And so I was trying to watch the show, and I was like, the series is still good. Like the books are solid, but I was in a completely different mindset when I read the books than where I'm at now.
Yeah, I tried to watch Discovery of Witches, the series, and I was having a really hard time getting into it. So I posted about it in my crowd, and they all said, read the books, don't watch the series. So I did read like that and was like, oh, these books are amazing.
Oh, they're so good.
I mean, the series wasn't bad. It was fine. It was me. It just was like, I just supernatural stuff, paranormal stuff just isn't normally like my jam. That's not normally what I said. I'm usually pretty open, but sometimes I'm just like, meh. But the books were phenomenal. Like I said, so the books were like, I was like, man, I wish I had picked these up forever ago.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's always, I'll watch a show and then they're like, oh, you know, that was a book. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. And then I'll go and read the book. I'm like, man, this is so good. Oh my goodness. What do you do when you're writing, but you get stuck?
Oh man. I just came off of about a year and a half, maybe a little less, a year and a half of like horrible writer's block, like horrible. Like it was, so I've never had it before. Every year since 2012, I've published about 40 books a year, always. Until not last year, but yeah, it started last year, started at the beginning of last year. So I had 2 senior dogs, a lab and a greyhound, and they passed away within 6 months of each other, and they were old. Like, so I knew they were sick, and like, it wasn't like this big shock that they were, you know, not going to be around much longer. But
it's still sad.
I didn't process like grieving it until the second one passed away, and then I just shut down. And like, I couldn't focus, I couldn't think, and I was like, didn't want to get out of bed. Like, I didn't realize, I think I was dealing with, I was also on a new medication at the time because I thought I was going to die. I was having weird medical issues, and they put me on all this medicine. So I think the combination of just not dealing with my actual emotions and the medicine shoved me into clinical depression. So every time I tried to write, I couldn't get going. So I had the prologue and the first 20,000 words for 6 months. And then I was like, got off the medicine because I was like, I feel terrible. So as soon as I got off that medicine, like a month later, I was like, I'm just throwing everything away because I can't get past where I'm starting over. And as soon as I did that, I was fine, like back on track. But it just took me so much longer to finish But yeah, I literally did nothing. I could do nothing to get past writer's block. It was scary. I was like, is this it? Is this the end? Am I done? Like, is my career over? Yeah, I don't know. Because I've never had it before, I didn't know how to cope with it. It didn't even occur to me that maybe I should just scrap everything and start over. Because I kept trying to rework that 20,000 words or come up to a solution with everything I already had. Because getting rid of a quarter of a book felt so daunting. It felt like if I tossed that 20,000 words away, was I ever going to be able to sit down and write the beginning of a book again? It felt like if I got rid of it or started over again, the book was never going to get done. So it was like this weird, but I don't know. So I guess that's what I would do this time if I ran into a wall. I don't know that I would tinker with it and try and fix it or start something new. I don't know. I mean, I feel like that's the only thing that works. So I would probably just scrap everything and start over again. Yeah, it's a lot scarier. Like it doesn't, people write it off, oh, writer's block, I couldn't write anything today. But like when that day turns into a year, it's terrifying. Like it's really scary.
I can relate. It being I have writer's block all the time. I can start anything. Finishing it, whole different story. But yeah, writer's block it's scary. And I'm sure as, a seasoned author, it's kind of sends you into an existential crisis.
It really was. I mean, the difference in starting and finishing for me is I don't really edit as I write. Like I don't go back and reread and tinker and tweak. Like I write all the way through till I get to the end, knowing that it's going to need work when I go back to it. But like in my brain, as long as I get to the end, that book is done and then I can fix it. Like the idea of getting a book done is often what I think trips people up. Like we got to get to the finish. Like we got to have all the words to get to the end. Like getting to the end, that always seems like such a hard thing to do. So if you just do it, and you don't have to do it great, you just do it, right. You get to the end, you have all the time in the world or whatever deadline you're working with. Better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, there's been times when I go to the end, send it to a publisher, the publisher sends it back, and I have to rewrite like the entire middle chunk of the book or the entire quarter end of the book or make all these changes throughout the book. Like very rarely do I ever send in a rough draft and come back and it doesn't take, another 2 weeks of writing and rewriting and adjusting but it doesn't matter because as long as you can fix it and it's finished, like your book is still done. Getting to the end is not what my problem is. Like now, I mean, I don't know that it's going to be an existing problem. Let's hope not. But my problem was getting beyond where I was stuck. I don't know if I ever smack into it again. Honestly, I think if it happened again, before I was worried about like writer's block, I would look at like the external factors of my life. Am I not processing things? Am I doing something different? Is it like something, because I don't think it was actual writer's block. Like I said, I think I was chemically prohibited from making smart choices and thinking clearly and like doing things right. And it wasn't just preventing me from writing, it was preventing me from doing everything,
Yeah. Depression is such a monster too.
I mean, and I should have known that was one of the side effects they talked to, but because the medical thing was so big and scary and could literally kill me, like I was way more worried about that than taking a pill and making me sad. You know what I mean? So I didn't really, I didn't deal with it the way I probably should have. Like I think I was dealing with some significant grief. I wasn't like processing through. So my thinking patterns weren't as normal as they were, but yeah, I mean, literally as soon as I got off that medicine, like I started to get up during the day and it didn't feel like it was the world's biggest hurdle in the world to get out of bed and get dressed. I could like function like a normal, I say normal adult, but I'm a terrible adult. So like my version of an adult.
Where can our readers, listeners, where can they find you?
Oh, on the internet, all the places, but don't follow me on TikTok because I hardly use it. Honestly, one of the best places to get updates is everybody should be on BookBub. All your readers, listeners, everybody should be on BookBub because they have the best like following program and like sale program. Like they're the best at keeping you updated about that stuff. I said I have a interactive readers group on Facebook called Crownover's Crowd. That's probably where I interact mostly one-on-one with readers. So you could search for that. And if you're looking for my books, they're on all regular e-tailers like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Apple Books. And my self-published stuff generally isn't in bookstores. Occasionally you'll find them, but all my traditionally published books can go in and out. It depends. The Marked Men series is getting new covers, so they're occasionally popping up in places with the new covers for resale. Yeah, they're all like the same colors that the original was. Like, so Rule's like kind of pink and blue, but they've all got traditional tattoo designs on the covers now. I think to go along with one, it is an update. It's been 10 years, a new update, and then the more discreet covers, because I refuse cartoon covers. I refuse them. I do not want illustrated covers. So they understood, and it wasn't even my idea. The like tattoo covers, they actually came from the publisher. I was like, oh, this is great. But then they let me give them the ideas of what they should put on each cover. They're like, it's like, what tattoo? I will just pick them off of my body.
I love it. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you talking to me. And everyone can find you in all the places, I'm guessing, at Jay Crownover or jaycrownover.com.
Yep. Just Google me. I'm there.
Thanks for watching my interview, friends. I hope you enjoyed it. Jay was the absolute best, and I cannot wait to talk to her about her new movie. If you want to watch more of my interviews, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/KJ Today. And if you want to read any of my book reviews, you can go to kjontheair.com. I love you, worms, and remember, happy reading!